Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Coming in on the music. But anyway, I'm sure I'm here now. This is Guineith Isaacs speaking here, keeping Vincent's feet warm all week. And he has stuff going on in his own life. And so he called me, or he emailed me, and he asked me if I could help him out. And I said, yes, of course, Vincent. You're absolutely great guy. Now, if you want to be a part of the broadcast, you can call on 866-582-9933, and the good people across at GCN will be more than willing to help you to get on the air. And there's no real particular call screening going on that I know of. So if you love me or if you hate me, feel free to call in. You'll find that we're all really good people. We're all really civil people here. And mostly the people who call in, but we ask that you do keep it civil. Okay. Anyway, generally people here, we're all on the same page. We all generally want to achieve the same things, and you'll find that we're a friendly bunch. Okay. Now, today's guest is Kyle from Montana. He lives off the grid. I live off the grid as well. But our environments could not be more different. Kyle lives in a cold, temperate area. So he has to deal with really, really severe winters. I live in semi-arid country Victoria. But a lot of the challenges that we face across climates and across continents are the same. And Kyle's wife, Sharon, will be joining us in the second hour. Hello, Kyle. How are you today?
Good morning, Guineith. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. How are you doing?
I am doing quite well. Yeah, actually, my wife and I just got out from the igloo, and so we... Actually, you make it sound like it's terrible, but it actually in the summertime up here, it's absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, it would be beautiful.
And quite hot, actually.
Yeah. That's the thing that people forget about cold areas. They actually do get really, really hot in the summer.
Yeah, this summer is kind of one exception that has been one of the hottest summers on record. For us, when you get into the high 90s, and that's in the shade. The high 90s in the shade. That's pretty brutal hot for us here. Of course, that's Fahrenheit, and so yeah, we deal with a lot of things that have really affected my garden this year. The lettuce just barely, it seemed like I had little sprigs of lettuce sprout and get up about maybe an inch high and then just stop. And I had very, very little lettuce this year, and the same thing sort of happened with my broccoli. Instead of creating these nice big heads that we wanted, it kind of got little sprigs of broccoli growing, and then wanted to bolt because of the heat. I don't know what when you garden there in Australia. I'm sure you deal with a lot more heat. Do you have to shade your plants, or what do you do to protect them, or rather than the particular species, to be able to keep them from just going right into bolt, to put seed out?
Okay. Now, I do a sort of farming here called permaculture, which is you basically, your garden ends up looking like something like a jungle. And we haven't been on this property for very long. We've probably only been here for about 4 years. This is our 5th year here. But with permaculture, what you do is you plant trees in your vegetable patch, okay, especially deciduous trees and especially deciduous fruit trees. So, but because we haven't been here for very long, our fruit trees aren't very big yet. But many of them started from just 6-inch tall, cuttings or seedlings, okay? And now, instead of being 6 inches tall, they're about 3 feet tall. But that's how we do it. And the soil here is absolutely pathetic. We live on granite country, and so the soil is very, very poor. It's not very deep either. The deepest that it would probably ever go is about 3 feet deep to 4 feet deep, and then you hit bedrock. You hit a clay layer, which is basically pure. In some places it's kaolinite clay, in other places it's terracotta clay. And then after the clay layer, you've got solid granite bedrock all the way through to the Earth's mantle, and it's not very good country at all. So what we do is I get fridges and bathtubs, and I seal any holes in the bottom of them with, there's a product out there in the hardware store called Sally's Need It, okay? It's a 2-pack epoxy putty. You get it and you knead it, and you can seal gaps and gutters, and you can, what I do is I seal up the plugged area in the bathtub and any gaps that might be in the bottom of the fridge or drainage holes that might be in the bottom of the fridge. And then once that's sealed, I drill holes a third of the way from the bottom, and then I fill the up to the drainage holes with a layer of wood chips. And we have wood fires here because, just like people assume that in a semi-arid climate that it's hot all the time. I assure you, it's not. We get really, really cold nights here, and there's not often snow, and it hardly ever lies on the ground, but it certainly gets to, in centigrade, maybe -5 at night during the winter. So we have wood fires, okay, and then on those winter days, it may not get above 10 degrees centigrade, and you may have weeks of this sort of weather in the middle of winter. And in any arid or semi-arid climate, this is what the winters can be like. You have snow in Arizona on a regular basis. And, anyway, getting back to the garden beds, you fill it up with the wood chips, and then you fill it up to the top with well-rotted compost, manure, and so on. And the compost and the manure is composted from the animal dung, okay? We have horse, we have dogs, and, there's also, there's various creatures. There's chickens and ducks and all sorts around here. And their manure all gets composted. And here's a key thing that I've discovered. When you're making a compost pile, if you have a wood fire, put the fire ashes onto the compost pile, once they're cold, that is. You put the wood ashes onto the compost pile, and what it does is it kills the pathogens in the manure, okay? And then you can compost it all together, dog manure, horse manure, chook manure, any sort of manure that you could name, if you have the wood ash, because it's full of naturally occurring caustic soda. And when it gets rained on and when it gets well composted down, okay, there's no pathogens in the manure anymore. And it's safe to use. If you have put wood ash into the compost, it's safe to use just as you would use any other compost, okay? And the thing is that once the caustic soda has gone away, it goes into the soil. It makes the soil around the compost pile hugely rich. It's just black. And we make our compost in a couple of enormous tractor tires. They would be about 6 feet across, okay? And they sit out near the chicken pen. And the chickens, we put all of our food scraps on top of there as well, and the chickens know that they can usually go to that place and get a feed, because if there's not food scraps there, they scratch, and they are the ones who stir up the compost pile, okay? And this is the thing about permaculture, is you get everything to work together. So, yeah, that's how we do it, and we plant it out. And it means, as well as that, we live in a eucalyptus forest, and eucalyptus trees are absolutely notorious for going and sending their roots into your garden bed and sucking the nutrition out. And there's no way to keep them out, and they're enormous. They would be probably, I would say around here between 50 and 100 feet tall eucalyptus trees, and many of them are well over 100 years old. And then we have the adobe mud brick house in the middle of the eucalyptus forest with a cleared area around it, of course, and that's where we live. the mud bricks were formed out of the soil.
And did you build that or yourself?
No, it was built by a pair of hippies back in the 1980s. So we're heading into a break.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back. Hello there, this is Guineith Isaacs speaking, keeping the seat warm for Vincent this week. And we have Kyle from Montana on the line, and we're talking about gardens. Now, Kyle, you were mentioning about the sun. I have noticed, okay, just at the beginning of this winter is our main time here for establishing new trees, because it rains in the winter. It does not rain where we are during the summer. So we may sometimes go for 5 or 6 months at a time with little or no rain. And so trying to establish trees during that time is absolutely, it's not going to happen. And so you get your trees established during the winter, and there's a planting window, and it's from approximately the autumn equinox, the fall equinox, to the spring equinox. Putting any trees in outside of that window, you're wasting your time and you're wasting your money. And in any arid or semi-arid area with winter rainfall, that's more or less how it is. But what I noticed, I put a pomelo tree in. That's it's a hybrid type of grapefruit. Has a very, very large fruit, and it grows to be quite a large tree. It was planted in a bathtub, so it probably won't get as big as what it ordinarily would. And when it gets a bit larger, what I'll do is I'll actually make a garden bed, which I'll describe at some time, out on the paddock somewhere, and I'll put it there. But until then, it can grow where it is. But I noticed the solar radiation was making the leaves of this grapefruit tree yellow. And I thought that it was a nitrogen deficiency because a lot of citrus, that's a problem with citrus, is keeping the nitrogen up to them because they're so hungry. They're very, very heavy feeders. But then I noticed that it was only the surface layer of leaves that were going yellow. The layer of leaves underneath that weren't getting direct sunlight hitting them were actually completely normal. There is a problem definitely with the sun.
I've noticed that this year with my tomatoes. The top layer of some, not all of the plants, but some of the plants turned yellow, and the ones underneath are just as green as they can be, and I've got tons of tomatoes growing, doing very well. But we have similar things up here as far as no topsoil. I mean, we have about a tablespoon of topsoil per acre around here. It's really poor. So what I did for my garden is the first thing I did is I put in a 6-foot high fence to keep the deer out, and I made it really tight to the ground. It's very difficult for anything pretty much to go under it. I haven't had that. I mean, squirrels can run through it, but that's about it. I use 2-inch by 4-inch welded wire. And anyway, I cut down about 15 trees, plumb right down to ground level. And then I covered it's about a 65 by 65 garden area. And I put in, I went to a friend of mine who has a trucking company, and he had a bunch of old truck tarps that were, 47 feet long, 50 feet long. And I put them down over the whole entire garden, and then I built raised beds. I have some in concrete and some I used wood that I put, that I had some 1 by 12 and 2 by 12 wood slabs. And I drove rebar into the ground, and then I had a whole bunch of scrap tin, like the wavy tin, and I cut that, and I put that on the inside of the boards to keep the dirt off of the boards. And then I filled it with a type of 3-way mixture of topsoil, compost, and sawdust, actually.
Yep. That would work really well. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody there. This is Guineith Isaacs speaking, standing in for Vincent this week. And we have Kyle on the line from Montana, and we're discussing our gardens. You know something, Kyle? You were mentioning that idea about the tarpaulins, the truck sides. I've actually thought of using that idea myself, but in the climate that we are in, raised beds, and in an arid or a semi-arid climate, raised beds, unless there's something like an old refrigerator or a bathtub that is basically where you can have a reservoir of water at the bottom, okay? It doesn't work because you need to have something hollowed out in the soil. You need to have like a hole or a low place in the soil. If you have anything raised, it's going to become intolerably dry for most plants. Okay?
Yeah, what I've noticed, it's really interesting because this is the first year that I've ever done that. Normally we've had regular beds that we made, would pile up over regular dirt, and then compost over the top of them or put mulch over the top of them. But what we have found that works really good for us is that we use the raised beds and we put in sawdust and all, all good soil and composted leaves and manure, goat manure and stuff like that too. But what we found is that if you do not have some kind of a layer of mulch over the top of them, they do tend to dry out very quickly. But when I first put the beds together, I put all of the sawdust down at the bottom. And so what happens is I've got this layer of sawdust, composted sawdust that's been there. It actually was an old mill at one time in the the gentleman that I bought it off of said that mill had burnt down like 30 years ago. And so this is extremely composted sawdust.
Yep.
And I put down about 8 inches of it. Then I put down a couple of inches of composted leaves, and then about an inch to 2 inches of goat manure that had been composted for a long time, and then mix that up. But what I found is once you kind of mix that all up and you plant your seeds and stuff in it, if you water it, the sawdust that's down lower will suck up that water, and it'll stay longer. It does tend to want to dry out on top, but if you will mulch that a little bit, like we do, we mulch around certain things that really helps. We mulched around our onions for sure, and it makes just giant onions that'll be, 4 inches in diameter. Really nice big onions.
Yeah.
But I have found that it looks and it feels a lot like a sponge. A sponge will dry out quicker, but at the same time, if you soak it, it'll really hold water for quite a while.
That's right. Well, this is why I mentioned earlier about the fridge gardens and the bathtub gardens that we use, how I put a layer of wood chips in the bottom. This serves a similar function. The water sits in that layer, and it's like a giant self-watering bed. You go to your big box stores, and you can actually buy these self-watering beds now from your big box hardware stores. But I make them out of fridges and washing machines, and instead of it costing like over $100, it costs like maybe $25 for a fridge or a bathtub from the tip, from the rubbish dump. And the rubbish dump actually sells them these days. You used to be able to get them for free. It doesn't happen that way anymore. But anyway, the reason why I mentioned about that, people, you've got to adjust your gardening method for the climate that you're in, is what I think that we can both see. You're in a high rainfall area, okay? And if you were digging your gardens into the soil, okay, to make a low place, you would probably find that you would get a bog, and that bog would become more or less permanent, okay? And, bogs are not good places for growing vegetables.
No, what I found by digging around here and putting steel posts into the ground is they didn't call them the Rocky Mountains for nothing.
Oh, yeah.
We have if you go down, literally an inch or two, and sometimes right on the surface, there will be rocks, everything from the size of your thumbnail to the size of a Volkswagen. And, we have rocks that are just, it's amazing. In where I live anyway. Now, there are areas around here when you get down into the flats that have really deep black dirt that are just amazing places to grow everything. But I don't like being in low places because they do tend to there's potential for flooding and things like that. So I do live at about 3,800 elevation is about what mine is right here. Yeah.
Well, we live, I think, probably about 300 or 400 feet above sea level, and so it's high enough to. And the other thing is, there's a big creek valley, a big river stream valley running through the middle of our block. Last year, we had the biggest rainfalls in about 50 or 60 years. And the stream in the valley flowed for something like 6 months or more. But normally, it's a dry creek. It's a dry creek bed. And, but that was absolutely wonderful. It used to be a permanent creek. But something, there's been something happening over the last 30 years with the rainfall. And I think that it is the geoengineering that is going on, the fact that they've been spraying such huge quantities of aluminium into the atmosphere. It is actually drying out the climate where we are. It has nothing to do with carbon dioxide. That's all just a farce. But I think that it does have a lot to do with the fact that they're spraying aluminium, because you've got, this is all a former gold mining area all around where we are. And it's all, you've got wells that up until the 1980s were permanent wells next to the track where the Cobb & Co. coach used to drive through the forest 100 years ago. The track is still there, the well is still there, but there's hardly ever any water in it these days. And they put the well in 100 years ago so that the Cobb & Co. horses would have something to drink, in the middle of the Australian bush on a hot summer's day. They've hardly ever got any water in them now, but the locations of them are still there. And like I say, the creek that we have running through our property was actually running until about 1993 or 1994. And I think that something that you would have found when you moved where you were is the benefit that can be had from making friends with the old-timers in the area. They're just an absolute wealth of information.
Yep, I have actually, that is absolutely true. One of my best friends is a guy named Tom, and he used to own the property that I'm at right now, and he lives in front of me sort of now, and he just has all kinds of information about the area here, and I would not even have bought this place if it did not have such a good well, but it's actually the well is only 60 feet deep, and it produces 40 gallons of water a minute. So, I mean, it's really incredible water. Plus, it's not alkaline, it's not hard, does not have a ton of iron in it. It's excellent water, the best we've ever had here. But you were mentioning your winter, being so much rain. This last winter for us, we had the 5th largest snowfall since 1899 last winter. It was really something. And we get... And I'll bet I do use a greenhouse.
Not had anywhere near as much. Or probably this coming winter for you will be a lot drier, because this winter, this one, I'm quite disappointed in the level of rain that we've had. It's been nowhere near as much, and it's been gentle falling rain rather than really heavy showers that we need to get the drainage lines going and to get the dams filled.
Yeah. Do you have a well, Guineith?
What we have, for our house water, we collect rainwater from our roof, and we have 40,000 litres. That's 10,000 gallons of rainwater storage capacity, and that's our drinking water. But for the agricultural water, we have a system of dams. Okay, in this country they call them dams. Where you are, they would probably call them ponds. Okay, so you get drainage lines that are bulldozed through the bush. Okay. The water runs into the drainage line and gets channeled into the pond, and it stays there. This particular pond, I think that it was probably dynamited out. That's just my environmental science knowledge, and the fact that you've got enormous rocks that are just sitting, a little distance away, that seem to have come from the bottom of the dam. And I asked our local old-timer if that was in fact the case, and he was very, very edgy about that. He didn't want to comment. But it basically is a gigantic hole that goes straight into the granite bedrock, and there seems to be a spring at the bottom of it, which is exactly what would happen if you dynamited it. Yeah, we're heading into another break. So there we go.
Yep.
Be back soon. Hello there. This is Guineith Isaacs speaking. We have Kyle on the line from Montana, and this is the last segment of your hour on the show today. And after the news at the top of the hour, we're going to have your lovely wife Sharon on the show.
Yeah.
What would you tell people if they wanted to set up this kind of self-sufficient lifestyle? What would be the one big bit of advice that you would give them when, or more than one if you want, if they're choosing land? What would be your main advice if they were wanting to set up this sort of place?
I would surely find out water is key to almost everything. And the type of climate, I would really want to know what that, because there is microclimates, especially in the mountains. It's really strange. Where I used to live, I was about 45 miles from the nearest town, and there would be people that would be literally maybe a quarter of a mile away from me, and they would be 10 to 15 degrees in the wintertime, and sometimes even in the summer, cooler than I was.
Wow.
So we have microclimates all over the place. I've got, even where I moved to right now, there is a friend of mine that literally lives a quarter of a mile as the crow flies away from me, maybe a little over, maybe 3/8 of a mile. And the other day, I had 37 degrees here Fahrenheit in the morning, and he had 33, and it frosted his tomatoes, you know. So you have to, know what you're going into. If you're going to be somewhere in Arizona, you're going to deal with a completely different problem than you're going to deal with in the Rocky Mountains. But on the bright side, in the Rocky Mountains of the United States up here, we deal with we usually have grass year round. There's some really good things. You just have to use a greenhouse, because you're going to need the extra month in the spring and about 3 to 4 weeks in the fall for growing season. But I have a 12-foot by 48-foot greenhouse that is just full of squash and corn and tomatoes and beans, and just absolutely loaded. My greenhouse is just amazing. I mean, I only planted this year maybe about 20 feet of tomatoes and maybe, 15 plants or something along that line. And I must have literally 200 tomatoes at least coming in really soon. That's bigger tomatoes. I don't have any cherry tomatoes at all. I mean, just at least 200 to 300 of them in that little area, and it'll be all we can do to give them away and eat them, and because we've already got everything canned that we wanted. But and I have peppers and all kinds of stuff growing in this greenhouse. It's just that's the only way to grow pretty much up here, unless you're in the quite a bit lower elevations. But choose the land wisely, and water is the biggest thing as far as I'm concerned, and the microclimate that you particularly live in. You can adapt to almost anything else, but if you've got poor water or very little of it, you're going to be hurting. You cannot live without water for your plants, your animals, and you. You just can't hardly do it.
I would absolutely agree. 2 winters ago, we had one of the driest winters that we've ever had. This is the one before we had the big flood. And we had a horrible, horrible, horrible summer. And we bought water in 20,000-litre truckloads, probably about 4 times over the summer. And each one of those truckloads cost $270. None of the rest of it happens if you don't have the water. We bought the water because there were crayfish and there were catfish in the dam, and we were using the dam to irrigate vegetables. And now there's almost 3 million litres of water in the dam, and I'm feeling much happier.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. We're heading into the top of the hour break. It's been great speaking with you, Kyle, and I look forward to speaking with Sharon after the news.
You bet. Yep. I feel the same.
Hello, everybody. This is Guineith Isaacs, keeping the seat warm for Vincent this week. We have on the line Sharon, who is the beautiful wife of Kyle, who was with us in the last hour from Montana. And her specialty in life is preserving all the goodness that is produced from the land where they are living, because there are good seasons and there are bad seasons, and there's even good times of the year and bad times of the year. So there's, you've in any survival situation or in any preparedness situation, you'll generally find that you have to preserve the bounty when it's there in one way or another, and that is Sharon's specialty, and that's what she's going to be talking about this hour. Hello, Sharon.
Well, hello, and I just found out what I'm talking about. I had been told we were going to discuss solar from a woman's point of view, but I'm cool with the other thing, too. That's great.
Just whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, I only heard about it yesterday anyway. I just got back from visiting my family in Alaska. My dad had a birthday party, and we gathered all the relatives, and I was coming home in the car, and my husband mentioned, would you like to be on it tomorrow? And they want you to talk about this. I thought, well, okay, sure.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about the solar as well, because we live off the grid as well. And at the moment I'm sitting in the dark because it's the middle of the night here, and every night our solar power goes off at a certain hour. And depending on the weather, because we don't have a particularly big solar power system, okay? And it means that we can't run refrigeration. And the lights are there until a certain hour of the night, and then it goes off, and it doesn't come on again until maybe half an hour after the sun comes up in the morning, when the battery's had a bit of a chance to charge. And one day, when I'm a millionaire, I'm going to get a big solar power battery. So this doesn't happen.
Well, I read about solar power way back in high school, and I always thought it would be really cool. And we've talked about it off and on throughout the years. But when we bought our decided by 35 acres way west of town, solar ended up being pretty much our own option, being as it would cost over $50,000 to bring in regular power. And we endeavored to live out of debt as much as possible. And so we weren't about to go into debt for some solar systems. So we set up just a real moderate one. First we tried to determine how much power we're using and how much we could reasonably reduce down to. And there were some pretty obvious things, but once we got out there and set it up, we did discover we used a bit more power than we were even thinking. So if anyone was setting up a solar system and had the opportunity, I would say put bigger if you can. But we worked it out. We did have and do here also have a generator backup. So if I really wanted to do something that we have big batteries and we just learned to use the power wisely. That was a bit of adjustment for our teenage daughter. She felt that she needed lots of electric appliances like hair dryers and all that kind of stuff, blow dryers and curling irons to look her best. So we sort of worked that out in the fact that if she really felt compelled to, she had to check where the batteries were at. My husband had a little panel up there, and you could tell how high they were charged. And if they were low, she got the honors of going out and starting the generator for a while. And then she got the honors of turning it back off. So we tried to work with it. But, teenage girls like to look their best, okay? So, within reason, she couldn't leave them plugged in like she does at her house now all the time. But it's workable. I'm sure you, just like you said, you're working out with the power that you have. And we did the same thing. You do your, heat. Anything that creates heat zaps power, as you know. So we try to minimize anything that created heat. And
Yeah.
So I actually realized very shortly that my regular toaster was not going to be a real good idea. So we switched to a camp stove toaster, and actually it takes about the same amount of time. You just have to watch it. That's all. I don't know. I think it has to do with your mindset and then also just being intentional. I shouldn't even tell stories, but the people who bought our property out there had a big learning curve. They actually had their freezer on the porch plugged in the sun, and I tried to suggest they might want to not do that, and they were sure that everything was going to be fine. And I'm sure by now, after having lived there quite a while, they've kind of learned that, But there's just things that you do or don't do. Like our system would not handle a freezer. I thought that maybe I could run it during the day, and I had extra foam inside of it, that styrofoam, and I put a big heavy blanket over, and then I thought I could turn it off at night and try to save the power, but that ended up not working out. It wouldn't keep cold enough, so our system wasn't near big enough to handle a freezer.
That's something that has been a really interesting challenge around here too. And I have now lived 4 years without refrigeration.
Now, see, I have not tried that.
Fridge since we've been here.
I have not tried that very long. We lived in a place where we didn't have power in for a couple months. Before, it was the way we used to live in Alaska, okay? And the place we bought, we didn't have power right away. But we did build a large cellar on our other property, and we built a pretty good-sized one here. But we were hoping to use that for refrigeration, which I actually did some. It just wasn't super close to the house, and I found that more inconvenient, to tell you the truth. But we did use it for a while, and it was acceptable. It really was.
Yep.
We got a propane fridge. It wasn't real big, but it worked. And then I always had canned, but I canned more of my stuff, okay?
That makes a lot of sense. And at the moment, people say, how do you live without a fridge? Because the thing is, it's not outback Australia, but it is country Victoria, and it's semi-arid, and it gets really, really hot during the summer. You think that you get hot where you are. It's very, very common where we are for it to be over 40 degrees centigrade during the day for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. Every single day. And it might get up to 45 or 47 degrees centigrade, which I don't know how much that is in Fahrenheit. I suspect it's I suspect it's something like 110.
It could be. Honestly, I have personally forgotten how you do the adjustment on that one, but
so it's really, really hot.
I'm sorry. Out of curiosity, can you build a root cellar? I mean, I heard you talking earlier that the ground is really hard, so that could be a challenge. But do people or have people in the past built root cellars and attempted to keep some of their food colder that way?
There's evidence that somebody's tried to put in a root cellar here. Okay, the roof fell in, and it's been low on the priority list to get it going again. I think I probably will try and get the root cellar growing again, because we have. I think I mentioned we have a creek valley running through our place. It's actually a Y-shaped creek valley, so there's actually two forks to the creek. And the creek, the fork on the creek that's closer to the house is where they put the root cellar in. And it's maybe probably about 50 metres from the house. And but this place, before we moved on to it, had basically been really badly neglected for about 10 years. And it needed a lot of work. When we first moved into the property, there was no pressure tower on the tank stand. That has since been fixed. That was a priority. There was a generator that belonged to the cellar, and they wanted their generator back. And so we had to put the solar power in. to have electricity, and the fences. There was one paddock, and now there's 8 paddocks.
Right.
And there was no reticulation of water. There was no pressure tank on the dam for water pressure. There were, the pumps and so many things needed to be doing. And the vegetable garden, the fences around the vegetable garden. We don't have deer where we are. Mm-hmm. We have kangaroos and wallabies. And some of these kangaroos are enormous. Some of them would be well over 6 foot tall. That's the big boomers, they're called, the big males.
Wow.
And they can jump, they can actually jump over 6 feet. But when they come to a 6 foot high fence, they will generally try and go around it rather than over it. We have a lot of similar challenges to what you have, but the animals involved are different. And this area in the Aboriginal language was actually called possum. There's no possums around here now. They died out quite some time ago, but the whole name of the district in the Aboriginal language, it means possum. So I don't know, maybe once I work on environmental improvements, then the possums will come back and then we'll know about it, won't we?
Maybe. You know what's neat, though, is that where you're at, you're figuring out how to adapt and it can work. And where we're at, we have a different way of doing it. But really, you can be successful in just about every climate if you just learn how to work with it. You really can.
That's right. Yeah. That's right, and it's a thing of being adaptable and paying attention to where you are and paying attention to the particular challenges that are there and to see them as not insurmountable. But we're heading into a break, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side.
Okay.
Hello there, everybody. This is Guineith Isaacs speaking. And I'm keeping the seat warm for Vincent this week. He's got other stuff going on in his life. And we have Sharon from Montana on the line. And we are talking about living off the grid, and especially with solar power systems, and the interesting challenges that it can present sometimes. Now, I don't have any teenage daughters, but I have 2 teenage sons. And they're both into technical stuff. They are. And in fact, we're all into tech stuff because I have a Bitcoin mine, and I from time to time I post YouTube videos, and I do other sort of computer-associated stuff. And so we have to be careful because we can sometimes have 3 laptops between the 3 of us and the router, and we have a satellite internet dish, okay? And one thing that we noticed when we got the satellite internet was these satellite dishes are really, really hungry little creatures. It runs at about 100 watts. And during the winter, in the middle of winter, you can't use the internet after about 4:30 in the afternoon, because otherwise you'll be sitting in the dark all night. We have little solar shed lights at various places around the house, so we're not falling over things. But I look at it this way: people, even just 50, 60, 70 years ago, electricity was considered to be a luxury. Most people didn't have it.
We have old houses in Kalispell. We're not in Kalispell, but we live up in Northwest here. But I've been in Kalispell, and they have old houses there, and they have only like 2 outlets in the whole room because people did not use as much electricity way back.
Yeah. Well, in this house, there's only 4 electrical sockets in the whole house.
Yeah, which tells you that people didn't used to use a lot of electricity.
That's
But,
right.
like you and your sons, you want your technology. And when we moved out to this property, my husband and I, he discussed about maybe just doing 12-volt system. And I explained to him that I really did want to have my appliances. I have mixers and I have blenders, and I like to cook. And I did not want to not be able to use those things, and it's expensive to buy 9-volt everything. So we went ahead and did the regular 110, 120, whatever it is, volts. But yes, we had priorities, too, where I can see, that was your priority. And that's something people, if they are going to go off-grid, need to really consider. What is a priority and what system? You do sound like you have a very basic system. We didn't have a very big one, but we obviously had one more than yours. I will say, we put our first system in, I guess, close to 15, 16 years ago, and the solar panels are immensely improved. One panel that's smaller will be the equivalent of 4 of the great big ones before. So It's a little more economical for people to get more power than it used to be. We were amused. This system we put in here, we moved here about, I think, 2.5 years ago or something. These panels, we have more of them, and they put out, like 4 times our old ones. So we're studying a lot better in this place, but then we were studying a little bit better economically because we owned our place and we sold it, so we had some money to put into this place, Yeah. But, you work with what you have. I get different magazines, and I'm not knocking Mother News, but they do tend to put these massive solar arrays in that have to cost a fortune to run every conceivable electric thing you would want. And if people want to do that and have the funds, I would have absolutely no problem with it. But a lot of people, and you probably run into this, say, well, I just can't afford to do solar. But as you're talking about, and as we've done, you can do solar and just cut back your electric usage.
Yeah. The other thing that you can do is you can build up your solar power in stages, okay? So you can go through a stage of buying more panels, and then afterwards buying more batteries, and then buying more panels, and then buying more. You can do it that way, but you usually have to double the capacity of your batteries each time. And you get to a certain stage, and you have to, Hello, everybody. This is Guineith Isaacs speaking again, and sitting in this week for Vincent. And I have on the line Sharon from Montana, and we are discussing what it's like to live off the grid with a solar power system. Where we are, we're in the southern hemisphere, and we live on a south-facing slope, okay? And we live in the middle of a eucalyptus forest. And this is something that people have to consider when they are installing solar power, is aspect and what you have around you. Fortunately, the people who were living in this house before us, they cleared quite a nice big clearing all the way around the house. So we don't have trees really shading the solar too much. But people have to take this into account, especially if they are considering moving into a forested environment.
I would agree. We have woods, and we had to cut. We actually had to cut down 2 beautiful big trees. We have lots of trees, but these were particularly beautiful. But we really wanted to be able to be off grid again, so they had to go, and we have others. But yes, you need to consider that for sure, because you have to have enough sun get your panels to charge enough, or you're going to have to use a backup, or as you guys are doing, sit in the dark. Dear.
Yep. We did have a generator. We had a marinized Yanmar generator. But you have an advantage in that you have a man with mechanical ability.
My husband is very, very capable. He can do just about anything he puts his mind to, and you are correct. I have an amazing advantage that way, yes.
Yeah. Whereas I'm actually a widow, and, motors are not my big thing. I think it's just not, my dad was an amazing mechanical guy, but he actually died 6 weeks before my husband. They've both been dead now for over 14 years. And, it's times like this that I really, really, really miss them. And apparently it was only a solenoid on the generator, but I had no idea of how to fix it. And somebody offered to buy the generator off me. They were going into an off-grid situation. They did have the mechanical ability to fix the generator. And so I said, well, you can get it going. I'm happy to sell it to you for the sake of you having some electricity where you are. And they were going once again into a solar power situation. It was better than it sitting here with me not having any idea what to do with it.
Yeah.
So,
though you have shown,
you've got to think that way.
Well, I was going to say also, you've shown, though, that even though you don't have a man, as you said, or somebody who is adept, you've managed to make it work. I think that most people probably wouldn't want to live quite as simple as you are, because it'd be too much of a shock, or it's just too much work. But, a basic solar system like us, we just learned to, the thing I had to learn is, like, if I wanted to vacuum, I pretty much need to do it when the sun was shining, okay?
Yes.
Or when I did laundry, I pretty much did it when the sun was shining. We did have a propane dryer, but the tub ran electricity, and in fact, we still have it. And it has a electric igniter to start it, and that used a little more power than we even thought, strangely enough. But you learn to do a lot of stuff. You just think about when to do it. Like in the summer, I could actually use a crock pot because we had a lot of power, but in the winter, I changed over to using a Dutch oven on my wood cook stove. I'm on the wood stove, which actually makes a really tasty meal. There's something about cooking in that cast iron that really makes a rich flavor. It's great. So I would do that occasionally. But, it's like you said, but, also I really think connections are big, okay? If you know people who know people, they can say, well, I'll trade you for this, or, if you fix that, I can give you this, or, bartering type of trading. Yeah. And I feel like we live in a society, maybe not where you're at, but most people I know don't know very many people in a closer way. I mean, they know them as acquaintances at work, but they have no clue what they do on their off time, and they don't have those connections. And I feel like connections are very valuable, and if things got crazy, you would really want connections. And so, my husband's incredibly good at bartering and trading things, so if he didn't know how to fix something, he would probably meet up with somebody who could fix it, and he'd work out a deal with them, But, if you don't know, you don't. But there is a lot of information, like on the online, that you can find out how to do a lot of things. But, we're not all skilled in the same thing, so if you're not, find somebody who is.
No, that's fair enough. But, it's a funny thing, because electrical circuits I don't have a problem with. I actually got this solar power system. And I did have some help from a solar electrician. He wasn't happy to put it together for me, but he showed me what to do, and I was able to go up there and put the solar power system, which I bought, which was in parts, together. And when I first got the generator, it actually was going. And I hooked up the generator, I hooked up the solar panels, and it also has a wind generator as well. And I hooked it all up together, and it all worked. So
it just shows you can do it.
It's funny,
right?
isn't it? Electrical circuits I can do.
Yeah, well, and that's really brave.
Yeah, it's. I suppose I could, if I sat down and sort of figured out how to do it. I suppose I could get motors working. But the thing is, it's a thing of what you feel inclined to do, and where your priorities lie. And I actually work pretty well full-time as being a telephonist. I earn my crust by doing card readings, tarot readings for people, okay? For one of the, actually it's an American company, it's one of the biggest 1-900 psychic companies in America. And so when I'm online, I'm pretty busy. And I'll get lots and lots of calls during the day. And a lot of them these days are actually repeat clients as well. I have to do that to bring the money in. And that's another area that I think that people don't consider when they are thinking to go off the grid. How are you going to bring your income in?
I agree. I totally agree. If you go too far out, it can be a challenge and actually pretty difficult to keep traveling back and forth. I mean, if you're willing to do it, it's not a problem, but you need to realize the time it's going to take, and it's more wear and tear on your car, and just be aware of it. But I don't feel that we have to know how to do everything. So, I mean, the more you learn to do, the better, I feel. But if you connect with other people who know how to do things that you either are not real gifted in or don't want to do, you can barter and trade and get the job done still without having to do everything yourself, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I've found that as well. There are things that I am quite good at. And they bring in the income, and I can either trade that cash for, things that I need, or I can do things for other people that they need help with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's pretty satisfying, though.
It's about building up a local network of people that you know, and people who have resources that you might need from time to time, okay, and to figure out who does what, and to have a list of telephone numbers in your book of people who live locally. Like, for instance, there's the water tanker guy, okay, and I found out that he has a farm. He also has sheep on his farm. He breeds sheep. That's his main business, okay, and the water carting is something that, is something extra. He has a good well on his place, okay, and he also has a lot of dam water, so he's able to sell the excess water on his place. And from time to time, like it'll only happen once every maybe 7 years or something, we'll have an exceptionally bad year and we need water in the dam. Well, I know who I can call. And he's an old-timer. His family's been there for generations. He's not going anywhere. But he also breeds merino sheep. And so if I really wanted to have a sheep for slaughter, I know how to butcher the sheep. I would just have to buy it from him, and he would bring it around here, and I would be able to butcher it up, okay? And this is something where, I can do that, and I can pay him cash. The cash helps him, okay? And he can provide me with a sheep. And, maybe from time to time I have run sheep and goats on this place, but maybe I don't want to run sheep all the time. And that's something that you've got to take account of. But you've got to have some way, some set of useful skills that you can trade, either for currency or for other goods and services that you need. And that means before you enter the preparedness lifestyle, I think that you have to have either a good skill set anyway, or you have to spend maybe a few years building the skill set, learning how to do something like, I don't know, maybe growing vegetables or keeping chickens.
So. But, I think people should just start. A lot of people say, well, I can't, and I don't have, and I don't, and I can't, and they got a million excuses. And like you said, if nothing else, get a couple pots and start growing something, or start canning up something simple like fruit, okay? Or dehydrate something. Start learning the skills. I think it's really wise to learn as many skills as you can, but I do not feel compelled to have to do everything, No,
that's right. And it's often not possible anyway. It's just about always not possible. Everybody's got to have their niche. Anyway, I'll see you on the other side of the break. This is the final segment, okay?
Yep.
Okay. See you soon. Hello, this is Guineith Isaacs speaking, sitting in for Vincent this week. I'm here with Sharon from Montana. This is the final segment, and often when I'm in the final segment of a show, what I do is I ask the guest if they have anything that they want for people, for to be a takeaway for the people in the class out there, in the listening audience. It's something that's really, really important that's on your heart that you would like to have as a final thing that you want to say.
Well, now that kind of took me off guard. I guess
just anything you want to say.
Yeah, it's probably kind of my mantra. I'm going to lead into this, but I once did a little substitute teaching, which I found an absolute blast personally, because I guess I'm kind of unconventional about how I do it. But they had to write an article, a little letter, seventh graders, I think, on luck. Okay, and one of the guys said, well, what about luck? I said, well, there are people who say you make your luck. And he looks at me like, what? And I said, well, there's people who start out small, little business, build it up, and pretty soon they own this great big business. They're making a lot of money, and they say, oh, they were lucky. I said, but the business didn't drop in their lap. They took steps to go that direction. And I feel the same thing applies to if you want to live a self-sufficient lifestyle. It's not just going to fall from the sky, You start out simple. Grow something little. Can something. Dehydrate something. Learn how to make your own bread. Learn how to cook. A lot of people don't know how to cook at all. Buy extra food when it's on sale. You have to take steps to get there. And I feel like people have I just don't know what to do. It's just too hard. I can't learn. Like, I can't work on motors. Well, so what? I can't work on motors either. Okay, I happen to have a spouse that can. But, so what? Yeah. Do what you can do. And so I guess that's kind of my bent. I can't very well, okay? Yeah. I'm totally willing to say there's some things I don't wish to do. I could do them. I prefer not to, and I will not do them unless it becomes essential, okay? Yeah. But I can do a lot, but I didn't learn it in one day or 1 year. We've been doing this for a long time, and I can do a lot, but I had to learn it one thing at a time. And I didn't come from a family really that did a whole lot of this. My mother did grow a garden. We did a little bit canning, but I actually didn't do very much of it. She kind of just delegated, chop up this or, put this in a jar. And so when I started, I actually called the extension service and asked them, by the way, what do I do? Like one time I was canning a huge batch of green beans, and at that time we had an electric stove. The power went off, and I thought maybe the whole batch was ruined. I called them and found out you can restart the whole timing over. But I didn't know that stuff. I just had to call, and then I read, and then I asked people that know stuff. And if people really are all interested in doing this type of lifestyle, they just got to start. That's all there is to it.
I would say you're absolutely right. My family background, we always had vegetables, and my mum was a master canner. She just had cupboards full of preserved goods, and a great deal of it actually came from our own vegetable garden, which was a third of an acre of land in the middle of the suburbs. But her, Dad had been a market gardener, and he'd had a dog boarding kennels. He'd had a chicken farm with about 3,000 chickens. And so, for the first part of their marriage, they had no electricity at all. They only had electricity when they stopped growing tomatoes and started growing chickens. And they had to have incubators and that sort of thing, obviously, and heat lamps, so they needed electricity. But what happened was when I first bought my first really big piece of land, which was 10 acres in Geraldton, I didn't have a clue what to do. I got sheep, and I needed to slaughter one day. I phoned my mum, and my mum was the one who taught me how to slaughter and process a sheep.
Well, you learned.
Now I can do it, no worries. It's an afternoon's work.
Well, we learned to cut up deer by watching a butcher friend of ours cut one up when I was a kid. I'm not young kid, I was a kid. And then my family started doing it, and so I just figured, we may not make the really fancy cuts, but I cook it, and I know what pieces they wear.
Delicious, isn't it?
And I've actually shown I've showed other friends how to cut them up because it costs a lot to have it done, and they've been pleased with it.